The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. A voice, shaking, desperate. Someone who claimed to know secrets that could destroy careers, end friendships, and expose a web of corruption that reaches the highest levels of entertainment and politics. "They know I'm talking," the caller whispered. "If they find out I'm going public with you, Piers, I'm dead." For most journalists, this would be another paranoid conspiracy theorist, another attention seeker with wild claims and no evidence. But when Piers Morgan checked the caller ID, he recognized the number immediately. This wasn't some random stranger. This was someone who'd shared red carpets with A-listers, someone who'd attended private parties with billionaires and politicians, someone whose name you'd recognize instantly if we could reveal it. But we can't. Not yet. What they told Piers Morgan that night would lead to the most intense interview of his career. 2 hours of accusations, denials, tears, and revelations that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about power in America. But before we show you what happened when the cameras rolled, you need to understand one thing. By the end of this interview, even Piers Morgan looked genuinely concerned for this person's safety. The studio security was different that night. 3 additional guards, metal detectors, and a sweep for recording devices that took 40 minutes. The guest's legal team had insisted on conditions that Piers Morgan had never encountered in 30 years of journalism. No real names, no identifying details about current residents. And most unusually, a lawyer sitting just off camera with the authority to stop filming at any moment. The studio lights dimmed as the guest walked in. 20 years ago, this person was on magazine covers, red carpets, and talk show circuits. A household name who commanded 7-figure deals and had the entertainment world at their feet. Tonight, they wore dark sunglasses indoors and kept looking over their shoulder. "Thank you for coming," Piers Morgan said, studying his guest carefully. "I have to ask, are you genuinely afraid for your safety?" "Piers, I've received 3 death threats this week alone." The voice was steady, but the hands were shaking. These people don't make empty promises. But here's what made this different from every other conspiracy theory Piers had ever investigated. The threats weren't anonymous. They weren't sent by random internet trolls or keyboard warriors. They came from phone numbers registered to major talent agencies. "Let's start with why you contacted me," Piers continued. "What changed your mind about going public after 20 years of silence?" The guest adjusted their sunglasses, a nervous habit that would repeat throughout the interview. "A young actor died 2 months ago. Officially, it was suicide. The media reported depression, career pressures, the usual narrative." "But you don't believe that narrative?" "I was at the party 3 days before he died. I saw what they did to him. I watched them destroy a human being in real time." Piers leaned forward. "What exactly did you see?" "I saw them corner him in a back room. 5 of the most powerful people in Hollywood. They had photos, videos, compromising material that would have destroyed not just his career, but his family's reputation." The guest paused, removing the sunglasses for the first time. The eyes were exhausted, haunted, surrounded by dark circles that suggested months of sleepless nights. They told him his career was over unless he agreed to their arrangement. A contract that wasn't about acting, Piers. It was about availability. Availability for what? For whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, with whoever they wanted. This was the moment Piers Morgan realized this interview would be unlike anything he'd done before. This wasn't about politics or ideology or celebrity gossip. This was about power, abuse, and assistance that protected predators at the highest levels. You're alleging that powerful people in Hollywood systematically blackmail young actors into sexual arrangements? I'm not alleging anything, Piers. I'm telling you what I witnessed for 20 years. What I participated in. What I enabled. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because this guest wasn't some outside observer. They weren't an innocent bystander who stumbled upon corruption. They were part of it. And Piers was about to prove it. "Let's talk about your own involvement," Piers said, his tone shifting from sympathetic to investigative. "Because you weren't just a witness to this system, were you?" The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. In television time, that's an eternity. You could see the guest's composure beginning to crack, the carefully rehearsed victim narrative starting to fracture. I did what I had to do to survive in that industry." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I kept quiet when I should have spoken. It means I looked the other way when young people were being hurt. It means I'm complicit in a system that I'm now trying to expose." This was the fracture Piers had been waiting for. The moment when the victim narrative collided with the perpetrator reality. But he wasn't done digging. "You say you looked the other way, but my research suggests you did more than that." The guest's face went pale. "What do you mean?" Piers pulled out a folder, thick with documents and photographs. "I mean, you actively recruited for this system. You identified vulnerable young actors and introduced them to the very people who would exploit them." "That's not... It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" "Because I have testimony from 3 different actors who say you specifically approached them at industry events. You told them you could introduce them to people who would help their careers. People who could give them the break they were looking for." The guest stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window. "You don't understand the pressure we were under. If we didn't deliver new talent, we became the targets ourselves." "So you sacrificed other people's children to save yourself?" "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that." The guest turned around, tears streaming down their face, and for the first time, Piers saw not a celebrity or a victim or a perpetrator, but a broken human being carrying 20 years of guilt. "You want to know the truth? The real truth? That's what I'm here for." "The truth is that I was 19 when they first approached me. 19, Piers. Just like that kid who died. I was broke, desperate, willing to do anything for my big break. And they exploited that desperation. They didn't just exploit it, they weaponized it. They turned me into a recruiter for the same system that destroyed my innocence." The guest sat back down. No longer the composed celebrity who'd walked in 2 hours earlier. This was someone reaching the end of a decades-long performance. "I watched them break that kid, Piers. I watched them destroy his spirit, his confidence, his will to live. And I realized I was watching my own story repeat itself. Except this time, I was on the other side of it." "You were the recruiter who brought him in?" A pause. Then, barely audible. "Yes." "Did you know what would happen to him?" "I suspected. But I told myself it was different. I told myself he was stronger than I was. I told myself he could handle it. But he couldn't. No, he couldn't. And 3 days after that party, he called me. He was crying, begging me to help him get out of the contract. He said they had videos, photos, things that would destroy his family if they went public." "What did you tell him?" The silence was deafening. Piers waited, knowing that sometimes the most powerful journalism happens in the spaces between words. "I told him there was no way out. I told him to just do what they asked and eventually it would end." "But it didn't end, did it?" "It never ends, Piers. Once you're in that system, once they have material on you, you're trapped forever. Unless what? Unless you die. Death is the only escape clause in their contract. Piers leaned back, processing the weight of that admission. Are you telling me that this young actor committed suicide specifically to escape this arrangement? I'm telling you that 2 days before he died, he sent me a text message. 3 words. I'm finally free. Do you still have that message? The guest pulled out a phone, scrolling through old messages with shaking fingers. They held up the screen, showing a timestamp from 2 months ago. And those 3 devastating words. This is why they want me dead, Piers. Not because I know their secrets. Because I have proof of what those secrets cost. But Piers wasn't ready to let the moment turn purely sympathetic. His research had uncovered something that changed everything about this narrative. I need to show you something, Piers said, pulling out another document. This is an interview you gave to Variety in 2019. You were asked specifically about rumors of abuse in Hollywood. Do you remember what you said? The guest's face went white. I don't remember exactly. Let me refresh your memory. You said, and I quote, "These conspiracy theories about systematic abuse are harmful and false. They're spread by jealous outsiders who couldn't make it in this industry. I've worked with the most powerful people in Hollywood for 2 decades, and I've never seen anything inappropriate." That was different. I was still what? Still trapped in their system, still dependent on their approval, still afraid of what would happen if I told the truth, or still profiting from that system. Another long pause. The guest's lawyer shifted in his chair off camera, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the questioning. Yes, I was still profiting from it. This was Piers Morgan at his most relentless. Every question was surgical, precise, designed to expose contradictions and force uncomfortable admissions. Help me understand this timeline, Piers continued. You spent 20 years participating in and profiting from abuse. You actively denied it existed when journalists tried to investigate it. You called the victims liars and conspiracy theorists. And now, suddenly, you've developed a conscience? It's not sudden, Piers. I've been haunted by this for years. But you only decided to come forward after your own career ended. After the same industry that protected you for 2 decades finally discarded you. After you were no longer useful to them. That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I sit, this looks less like moral courage and more like revenge against an industry that threw you away when you got too old to be profitable. The guest stood up again, this time walking toward the exit. For a moment, Piers thought the interview was over. But then they stopped, hand on the door handle, and turned around. You think this is about revenge? I think it's convenient that your conscience only activated after your career died. My conscience has been screaming at me for 20 years, Piers. Every night, I see the faces of the kids I fed to that machine. Every morning, I wake up wondering if today will be the day someone exposes what I've done. They walked back to the chair, but didn't sit down. Instead, they stood directly in front of Piers, close enough that the cameras captured every line of exhaustion on their face. You want to know about convenient timing? The convenient thing would be to stay quiet and die with my secrets. The convenient thing would be to take the money they're offering me to disappear permanently. The convenient thing would be to let that kid's death be just another Hollywood tragedy that gets forgotten in a week. They're offering you money to stay quiet? $5 million? Cash. All I have to do is sign a statement saying everything I told you tonight was a lie brought on by grief and mental illness. Piers blinked. And you're here instead? I'm here instead. Why? Because I realized something when I got that text message from the kid. I'm finally free. He found his freedom through death. But maybe I can find mine through truth, even if it destroys you. Piers, I've been destroyed for 20 years. I've been walking around like a ghost, pretending to be alive while dying inside every day. This isn't about destroying me. This is about rebuilding something real from the ashes of what I pretended to be. Piers sensed this was the moment for his most direct question, the one that would define this entire conversation. Do you believe your decision to stay silent for 20 years makes you partially responsible for every victim who came after? The question hung in the air like a blade. You could see the guest's entire body respond to it, shoulders sagging under the weight of 20 years of accumulated guilt. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. I am responsible. Every kid I recruited, every warning sign I ignored, every time I chose my career over someone else's safety. I am responsible for all of it. Including the young actor who died? Especially him. Because I brought him into that world. I delivered him to those predators. And when he begged me for help, I chose to protect myself instead of protecting him. You could have warned him before introducing him to these people. I could have. But I told myself he was different. Stronger. Better able to handle it than I was. Or you needed him to go through what you went through so you wouldn't be alone in your guilt. The accusation landed like a physical blow. The guest actually staggered backward. That's the worst part, Piers. Because there's truth in that. Having other people trapped in the same system made me feel less alone in my shame. So you created more victims to feel better about being a victim yourself? Yes. And that makes me a monster, doesn't it? Piers studied his guest for a long moment. I think it makes you human. A damaged, complicit, guilty human being who made terrible choices for understandable reasons. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make you accountable. Because understanding why you did something terrible doesn't excuse the fact that you did it. So what happens now? Now you tell me about the evidence you claim to have. Because accusations without proof are just allegations. What can you actually provide? The guest reached into a briefcase, pulling out multiple thick folders, USB drives, and a laptop computer. Bank records showing payments to silence victims. Audio recordings of conversations between industry executives discussing how to handle problematic actors. Photos and videos from parties where illegal activities took place. Contracts that explicitly outline the availability requirements for young actors. Piers opened one of the folders, his expression growing more serious as he reviewed bank statements showing transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars with notation lines like consultation fees and discretionary services. This is substantial. These account numbers, they're traceable? To shell companies owned by 3 major studios, 2 talent agencies, and a production company you'd recognize immediately. And the audio recordings? The guest opened the laptop, clicking on a folder labeled with dates going back 15 years. Conversations recorded at parties, in offices, in cars. People discussing which young actors were receptive to arrangement opportunities, and which ones might need additional persuasion. You recorded these conversations without consent. I recorded them for self-protection. If they ever tried to destroy me, I wanted evidence of their involvement. But you're willing to release them now. I'm willing to give them to law enforcement. I'm willing to testify. I'm willing to face whatever legal consequences come from my own actions. Piers played one of the audio files through his earpiece, his face growing darker as he listened. These people are discussing a 16-year-old actor like he's property to be traded. That's how they see everyone under 25. As assets to be developed, exploited, and discarded when they're no longer profitable. Why haven't you taken this to law enforcement before now? Because half the people in these files have connections to law enforcement. Because district attorneys get campaign contributions from the same studios. Because judges attend the same parties as the perpetrators. But you believe things are different now? I believe that kid's death changed something. Media attention is higher. The public is more aware. And I'm not the only person with evidence anymore. There are others. 3 other people have contacted me since the story of his death broke. 3 other former recruiters who are ready to come forward. And they have similar evidence? They have names, dates, recordings, financial records. Between the 4 of us, we can document over 200 instances of coercion, blackmail, and abuse spanning 25 years. Piers closed the folder and looked directly at his guest. You realize this interview will likely destroy what's left of your reputation. You'll be seen as either a hero or a villain, with very little middle ground. I stopped caring about my reputation the night I got that text message. I care about doing the right thing, even if it's 20 years too late. And if they follow through on their threats, if they try to silence you permanently, then at least this interview will exist. At least the evidence will be in the hands of people who can use it. At least other kids will know they're not alone if they ever find themselves trapped in this system. Do you have a message for the young actors who might be watching this? The guest looked directly into the camera for the first time, removing their sunglasses completely. If someone in this industry approaches you with promises of career advancement in exchange for private meetings or special arrangements, run. If they show you photos or videos of other actors who benefited from their guidance, run faster. If they tell you this is how the business works and everyone does it, they're lying. And if someone is already trapped in this system, document everything. Record conversations if you can. Save all communications. And know that there are people working to expose this system who will believe you and protect you. Even though you were part of the system that trapped them? Especially because I was part of it. I know how it works. I know their tactics. I know their weaknesses. And I know how to fight them. The studio fell silent. 2 hours of revelations, accusations, and admissions had led to this moment. A broken person, seeking redemption through exposure of a system they'd helped perpetuate, sitting across from a journalist who'd managed to extract both confession and evidence of massive systemic abuse. Final question, Piers said. If you could go back to that party in 1999, the one you mentioned earlier where this all started, knowing what you know now, would you make a different choice? The guest looked directly into the camera one more time. I would burn that whole system down. I wouldn't care who went down with it, what careers were destroyed, what reputations were ruined. I would choose the temporary pain of exposure over the permanent damage of complicity. Even if it meant destroying your own career from the beginning? Especially then, because 20 years of success built on other people's suffering isn't success at all. It's just elaborate, expensive guilt. As the cameras stopped rolling, Piers Morgan found himself in an unusual position. For once, he wasn't sure whether he'd interviewed a victim, a perpetrator, or something more complicated than either label could capture. What he did know was that the evidence was real, the recordings were damaging, and the story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.